About how alleles affect inheritance. You should have your notebook out and be ready to record any important information. How do alleles affect inheritance? Mendel reached several conclusions from his experimental results. He reasoned that individual factors, or sets of genetic information, must control the inheritance of traits in peas. The factors that control each trait exist in pairs. The female parent contributes one factor, while the male parent contributes the other factor. Finally, one factor in a pair can mask or hide the other factor. The tallness factor, for example, masks the shortness factor. Genes and alleles. Scientists use the word gene to describe the factors that control a trait. Alleles are different forms of a gene. The gene that controls stem height in peas has one allele for tall stems and one allele for short stems. Each pea plant inherits two alleles, one from the egg and the other from the sperm. A plant may inherit two alleles for tall stems, two alleles for short stems, or one of each. An organism's traits are controlled by the alleles it inherits from its parents. Some alleles are dominant, while other alleles are recessive. A dominant allele is one whose trait always shows up in the organism when present. A recessive allele, on the other hand, is hidden whenever the dominant allele is present.
Okay, so here is a table that shows some of Mendel's results. The P stands for the parent generation, and the F1 stands for the first generation of the offspring. So we have seed shape, seed color, pod shape, pod color, and that is cut off. Let me just move that. Flower color, flower position, and stem height. And basically it's showing you what each parent had, and then the F1 is what the first generation of offspring resulted in. So for number one, you have to identify each dominant form of the trait based on the parent generation. Okay, so what you need to do is look at what the parents had, look at what the offspring has. Now keep in mind that if they're different, the one that the offspring ended up with, or is visible to us, is going to be the dominant trait. So let's start with seed shape. We have the parents, one was wrinkled, one was round. The first generation of offspring has a round seed shape. So based on that, which one is going to be dominant? You should have written down round. Moving on to seed color. One parent was yellow, one parent was green. The offspring ended up with a yellow seed color. So based on that, if the offspring received one allele from each parent, but we physically see yellow, which color is dominant? Write it down. You should have written down yellow. Now I want you to, I'm going to give you a few seconds. I want you to hit pause, and I want you to do pod shape, pod color, flower position, and stem height. Don't forget to hit pause. Okay, so for pod shape, you should have written down smooth was dominant. For pod color, green was dominant. Flower color, purple was dominant. Flower position, side of the stem was dominant. And for stem height, tall was dominant. And in case you didn't get all of that, there you go. Okay, so you need to write these down. You're going to have to hit pause because I'm going to keep on talking. Now for number two, you need to predict under what conditions would the recessive form of one of these traits reappear. So in other words, if I wanted to know if there's a possibility of an offspring having, for example, a wrinkled seed shape, when is the only time that can happen? Again, you're going to hit pause and try to answer the question. You should remember that anytime the dominant allele is present, the dominant allele takes over. So think about that. Okay. And here's your answer. The only time you're going to see a recessive allele is when both alleles are recessive. So in order to have a wrinkled seed shape appear, both parents would have to have that allele for seed shape.
Alleles in Mendel's crosses. In Mendel's cross for stem height, the purebred tall plants in the pea generation had two alleles for tall stems. The purebred short plants had two alleles for short stems. But each F1 plant inherited one allele for tall stems and one allele for short stems. The F1 plants are called hybrids. A hybrid is an organism that has two different alleles for a trait. All the F1 plants are tall because the dominant allele for tall stems masks the recessive allele for short stems. Symbols for alleles. Genetic scientists who study genetics often use letters to represent alleles. A dominant allele is symbolized by a capital letter. A recessive allele is symbolized by a lowercase version of the same letter. For example, capital T stands for the allele for tall stems, and lowercase t stands for the allele for short stems. When a plant has two dominant alleles for tall stems, the alleles are written as capital T, capital T. When a plant has two recessive alleles for short stems, its alleles are written as lowercase t, lowercase t. These plants are the P generation shown in Figure 4. Think about the symbols that would be used for F1 plants that all inherit one allele for tall stems and one for short stems.
Okay, so let's just review what we said here. If a plant is purebred, don't mind the handwriting, purebred for a tall stem, and we're using the letter T, what are his alleles going to look like? Or its alleles? I want you to fill that in. Okay? If the plant was purebred, again, don't mind the handwriting, purebred for short stem, what are the two letters going to look like, or the two alleles that represent that trait? So I want you to hit pause, and I want you to try to fill that in. Remember, we are using the letter T. When you are talking about one trait, whatever letter you pick, so for example, we're using T for the dominant allele, you have to use the same letter for the recessive allele, just a lowercase version of it. Okay, hit pause and attempt to do that. All right, welcome back. So for purebred, we already know that the capital T represents tall, and we know it has to have a capital T because we said it had a tall stem. Now, purebred means that the alleles are exactly the same or identical. So in this case, we would have to have a second capital T. Okay? Now for purebred short, what letter represents a short allele? You got it! Lowercase t. So purebred means that the alleles are identical, so we're going to fill it in with another lowercase t. What if it were a hybrid? Ooh, okay, hybrid. Hybrid. Okay, don't mind the handwriting. It's all right. I think we're good. So if it was a hybrid, if you remember from your vocab, hybrid means that the alleles are different. Keep in mind that we can interchange the word hybrid and heterozygous. So pause it and try to fill that in. Remember, the alleles are different, and you're using the letter T. What is the only combination of the letter T where they would be different? Hit pause, fill it in. Okay, we'll come back again. So, hybrid means the alleles are different, using the letter T. The only combination would be a capital T and a lowercase t. All right, now we're moving on. Okay, so now you are basically going to fill in the missing allele symbols. So anywhere you see the little box, you're going to fill it in with the correct letter in your notebook. Okay, so hit pause, and I want you to fill in what a purebred tall would be, what a purebred short would be, and what a hybrid would be, and then see if you can fill in the blanks. All right, good. You should have attempted this already, so let's see if you got it right. Purebred tall is represented with two capital T's, purebred short, two lowercase t's, and a hybrid, a capital T and a lowercase t, which represents a dominant allele and a recessive allele. Now, in the F1 generation, all plants inherit one dominant allele and one recessive allele. So they carry the allele for short stem, but all of these plants are going to be tall. Why? Basically, the reason is because they carry that tall gene. So the tall gene is going to cover up or hide the recessive gene. So physically, we don't see it. Within the genetic makeup, the trait is there, but we won't see it physically. All right.
Save.